Around the world in recent weeks and months, we've seen ordinary citizens urgently rise up in the face of bad governance and authoritarianism. In France, millions have taken to the streets protesting President Emmanuel Macron's unpopular plan to raise the retirement age, accusing Macron of ruling by decree and ramming through changes to the national pension without parliamentary approval. While in Iran, anti-regime protests raged for months following Mahsa Amini's death in police custody, amid wider calls for women's rights and freedom. In Nigeria, thousands protested the country's election results, alleging vote tampering and voter intimidation. And in recent days, Israel was nearly paralyzed by massive protests over far-right Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to weaken the country's judiciary, to make it harder to remove him from power, after he fired his defense minister for speaking out against his proposed changes. Today, Netanyahu, who was voted back in as prime minister despite still being under indictment on felony bribery, fraud, and breach of trust charges, announced a delay in his judicial plans, saying he wanted to avoid civil war and make time to compromise. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., we seem to lack the same urgency as our own authoritarian in waiting, Donald Trump, effectively threatens civil war, largely for the same reason as Netanyahu, to keep himself out of jail. As Trump attempts to control our judicial system with warnings of death and destruction from his supporters, he gave a clarion call to insurrection version 2.0 over the weekend at a rally that looked a lot like a cult gathering in Waco, Texas, a right-wing shrine infamous for the 51-day standoff between federal agents and the Branch Davidian doomsday religious cult. And in a clear nod to the dark legacy of Waco, with his speech falling on the 30th anniversary of the deadly standoff, Trump leaned into his role as a cult leader, leading the crowd in lionizing the January 6th insurrectionists, showing a video of the attack accompanied by a song recorded by men in prison for their role that day. And Trump followed that with a conspiratorial call to arms, which we're not going to give him the benefit of playing on this show. But just know that he attacked the prosecutors investigating him, saying our justice system will be defeated, telling his followers, they're not coming after me, they're coming after you. And he cast the 2024 election as a final battle, telling his supporters that once again, he is their retribution and he is their justice. Totally normal stuff. Joining me now is Charlie Sykes, editor-at-large of The Bulwark and an MSNBC contributor. And, you know, Charlie, it strikes me that the Waco timing doesn't feel coincidental. This was a religious cult that set fire to its own building to protect a leader who was raping children and declaring himself to be Jesus and God on earth. I feel like Trump leaned into that.
Well, Trump leaned into it because he wants to amplify his anger and his and the atmosphere of menace. You know, apparently he thought it wasn't enough to simply threaten death and destruction or tweet out images of him with a baseball bat and the prosecutor in Manhattan. So what he's doing, though, is he is embracing some of the most violent imagery of the past in order to sort of create this environment of the future. And I think the juxtaposition of what's happening in Israel is very, very interesting. We're not there yet, but it's an indication of what happens when you have a leader of government who's on trial for corruption and then uses his power to destroy the independent judiciary. And what you are seeing is really a textbook case of how a democratic society can push back against the authoritarian playbook. And that's what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing. He's reaching for the authoritarian playbook. His law would strip the independent judiciary of its ability to review parliamentary legislation. It would allow the parliament to overrule the Supreme Court. It would basically remove any sort of guardrails on government power, including his far-right coalition. It is a real, imminent, immediate threat to the constitutional order in Israel, and civil society has risen up. So what you're seeing is a society that is basically saying, we are not going to allow Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition to destroy all of the checks and balances in our society. I mean, the conflict of interest is obvious. The fact that he is cynically using his power in order to destroy this is front and center. So you have business people, you have academics, you have fighter pilots, you have military reservists, all rising up and saying, no, we're going to fight for these values. And as of today, they forced him to back away. So this is something to keep in mind, that if we ever happen to have a leader in our country who is under indictment or has been convicted of crimes and decides to use the full weight of his power to try to destroy the rule of law, that would be the moment for us to look back on what's happening in countries like Israel and others, to be able to push back, because it can be done. Yeah, it may come a moment when we're going to have to do that. Because I think a lot of Americans are complacent about these issues, and yet we could have that moment. In Israel, there's no complacency.
And I agree with you. And in other countries, too, you've seen, I mean, in France, this was literally just about raising the retirement age 2 years. And I mean, France has a history going back to 1789. They don't play around. They protest. But I mean, to go back to the Israeli sort of situation and the analogy with ours, I mean, Netanyahu got reelected touting the same kind of luxuriating in violence, in this case against Palestinians, and put together this far-right coalition that is the most racist right-wing, coalition that Israel has seen, at least in my lifetime. I mean, they are far right and farther right than he even was before. And that idea of sort of luxuriating in the idea of violence against Palestinians was part of the appeal. But you're right, there was a breaking point that the society there had that unfortunately didn't have to do with stopping that kind of violence. It had to do with the idea that he was going to seize dictatorial power. And I wonder what you think about here, because, Donald Trump tried that with the judiciary here. He has over 200 appointees on the federal bench, and he was mad that the Supreme Court, the three he put on the court, wouldn't give him the election. He got a Florida judge that did do his bidding and tried to protect him and did his bidding, and he thought all of them should do it. If he were to come back in, let me read you this. This is from a guy named Dan Moynihan, who says that one of the major mistakes Trump made is that he wanted to disembowel government to hold on to power. And it says Trump's weapon to disembowel government is an executive order he signed shortly before the 2020 election. It's called Schedule F. It allows a president to force tens and potentially hundreds of thousands of career officials to become political appointees, stripping them of job protections. In short, it allows the president to fire civil servants who fail his political loyalty test. Trump ran out of time before he could implement Schedule F. Biden rescinded it. But if Trump wins in 2024, an aggressive purge of the civil service will be one of his first priorities. Fascist governments usually start by purging the civil service. This sounds like a promise to do it. And you know who else loves the idea of doing a Schedule F? Ron DeSantis.